What's up, it's your boy Oxide Wes here. We're just gonna react to a reasonably short video that's like on my YouTube page and actually like discuss. So, in the second row, I have this video called "Give Me 9 Minutes and I'll Improve Your Storytelling Skills" by Philip Hum. So let's check this out.
Hey there. Storytelling is one of the most powerful tools to hook your listeners and keep
I'm gonna
them
increase
glued
the
to
speed,
every word you say.
and I'll
But
just
hey,
keep
a
your
lot of the advice that is
yeah,
out there, it's way too complicated. But the truth is, storytelling is actually pretty simple if you know what really matters. If you just give me 9 minutes, you'll discover the 5 storytelling techniques to tell insanely good stories. But before we do
Okay,
that, let
even
me
the
show you a
promise
quick example by John
to tell
Krasinski,
you in
who you
nine
might know
minutes.
from The Office. It's a 20-second story, so really short, but it's so powerful. By the end of today, you'll know exactly how to tell stories just like him. And then I said, yeah, and he says, who are you visiting here? I said, my wife. And he says, is she an actress? I said, yeah. So would I know her? I don't know, man. Her name's Emily Blunt. He goes, you? And I went, yeah. And he goes, you married Emily Blunt. And I go, yeah. And he goes like this. Okay, go. Did you notice what he did there? He didn't just summarize the events. He didn't say, oh yeah, back then I was at customs and the agent asked what I was doing and I responded I was an actor and he was very surprised. He doesn't do that. He doesn't summarize the events. Instead, he zoomed into the moment of the story. The best stories don't just summarize events. They don't stay at that helicopter level. They zoom into the moment. They
Arrive
take
late,
us into the trenches. They let us be
leave
part of that
early.
physical moment. The good thing is, it's not that difficult. I'm now going to show you 5 techniques that you can use in all of your stories. First technique,
Okay, let's
location.
go.
Say where you are. The best stories start by stating the location. Where are you physically? Examples. 2 weeks ago, I'm sitting on my couch in my living room, taking a deep breath. Or September 2019, I'm standing in front of the conference room, ready to walk inside. Now, why does it matter to state the location? Because the moment you say conference room or living room, your audience will start to visualize it. They're like, oh yes, I know a conference room. And they start to visualize their version of that conference room. Now, beginner storytellers, they often do the mistake that they give too many details. They're like, oh, in that conference room, there was a big table, a television, and a wooden floor. Don't do that. Don't do that. It doesn't matter. Just state the location.
One thing I like to do is actually like to start with a feeling like, yo, it was definitely a life-changing moment that I was in. And so, yeah, we were there in the office and I was trying to explain how we can bring together, the business mindset and people's mindset, in a more synergistic fashion, da da da.
As long as they can visualize it, it doesn't matter all the details. They have their own version of that location. Second technique, actions. What are you doing in that specific moment of the story? Instead of giving way too much context about all the random stuff that doesn't matter, just say, what are you doing in that specific moment? That can be walking, biking, shouting, reading, waiting, whatever it is. Just state the action.
One thing you'll realize about people when they speak and when they tell stories is where they at mentally. Like, if a lot of the discussion is about how they felt in that moment, they're still a very reflective and reflexive entity because things are happening to them and they're processing it. They are their driver's seat, their experiential seat is in their head, if that makes sense. If, like, you're receiving what's happening to you and then you still process it and then you operate. Some people are able to be within the moment and just like also reacting, but reacting in a very
Eat the verbs.
on the
Examples.
fly.
I'm in my office, I open my laptop and start reading a message by my manager. Or 2 weeks ago, I'm at the airport waiting in line at security. And why does it matter to state the actions? Because it brings in forward momentum. It takes the listener right into the moment. When you do that, your audience will immediately know that you won't waste their time. You're straight away taking them to the most important part of the story. Third technique, thoughts. What are you thinking? We as humans have thousands and thousands of thoughts every single day. A lot of those thoughts are hopes, dreams, plans, fears, worries, crazy thoughts. Now, share some of those thoughts of that crucial moment of the story. Example, instead of saying, I was excited to meet my crush, say, I thought, this will be so cool, right? Finally, I can see her after all that time. Or instead of saying, I was very disappointed about that presentation, say, I thought, oh man, this is bad, right? Everyone will think I'm stupid. I can never go back there. Do you see the difference? It's a tiny tweak, but it makes any story more interesting. But hey, a common mistake
Notice
is
it's
that
about
people share
emotions and
thoughts that
feelings here
sound
as
too
well.
professional, too intellectual. They say something like, I thought this represents a supreme opportunity. Now, would your thoughts actually sound like that? Probably not, right? And so what you want to do is when you share your thoughts, give us the raw, unfiltered thoughts. Give us those a little bit like ranchy, juicy, a little bit neurotic thoughts. Now that will make your story much more relatable. Fourth technique, emotions. What are you feeling? The best stories, they're emotional. They take the listeners on this emotional journey. And now, with the thoughts...
So you see, I've been speaking about emotions the whole time and he's left it for like the fourth point, but like, yeah, I think emotions is the first point. It's the leading point. It's what makes music so powerful. It's what's making, visuals and media so powerful. Is that emotion, leading with that emotion.
You know now one technique to make it more emotional, but there's another one. The simplest way is to just state an emotion. So you say something like, I was disappointed, I was relieved, I was happy. Now, that is pretty standard, right? That is what most people do. But it's not ideal because it is not really visual, right? When you hear someone saying, I was disappointed, well, you cannot visualize it. And so the better way is to show the emotion, show how it looks on the body, on the face when you experience that emotion. Let me give you some examples. Instead of saying, I was relieved, say, in that moment, I leaned backward, let out this big, or instead of saying he was anxious, say, he kept tapping his pen on this table and he kept glancing up to the clock every few seconds. Do you see the difference?
A lot of what he's speaking about too is also like in public speaking or like in storytelling modes, presenting to camera, trying to communicate with people in a way that actually changes their emotional state and actually gets them from point A to point B. Every form of media is transformational. I think that's why in a lot of traditions, religious traditions, you could say like there's this thing about like media and music, and be careful of that. That's because all forms of media, even religious media, any form of like communication between human beings is transformational. Sometimes we just have, the plain old, with speaking about emotions, skinnering about other people, gossiping, whatever the case may be. These are all transformational states. That's why they say like gossiping and stuff is also dangerous in some way, because you are taking a state and you're transforming yourself into another state. But is that the end state that you want to be? Do you want to be in a reflexive, judgmental sort of area in your life? Because guess what? The moment you're judgmental about others, it kind of reflects back on yourself. Or the moment you're really judgmental about yourself, you start judging other people's actions really intensely and nitpicky.
Showing the emotion makes it much more visual. It takes us into the specific moment of the story. Technique number 5, dialogue. What are you hearing? Many of your stories will have more than one character, maybe a manager, a friend, a coworker, your dog, whoever it is. Now, what did the character say in that crucial moment of the story? What were they?
I wanted to speak about like when like telling a story. When I was younger, especially, I was really good at this. I was really good at like like compressing characters, maybe to make like a stark stereotype of this sort of entity, and like create and present it as something like, yo, this is what happened, da da da. Like nowadays, I try and be a bit more like, I try and tone down a lot of like the excitement or like the, because I found a challenge, especially earlier on in my life. It's just like, heightening experiences, heightening. And, shout out Megs, she'll even tell people like, yo, this guy can exaggerate when, given a chance. And especially amongst friends, and there's like a bit of like social rapport and understanding about how I operate as a person. And I'll like stretch the story a bit just for the extra juice. But like in terms of like, person to person trying to give information and explain certain things, I try and tone down. But when it comes to being on stage or being in the presence of like a presentation, you try and present yourself now in the best manner possible. And I've started watching like recruitment videos and like videos about people, doing job interviews and stuff like that, where they communicate in a way that is not necessarily the truth. It is the presentation. It's a sales pitch of who you are, what you're trying to achieve, that is in line with the vision of the other person. And I'm trying to put that more into my everyday speech and how I like engage with people. It's just like centering it around them. Like, what can I do in your life? What is my existence as a service to you? Because a lot of higher order spiritual sort of um, commandments or energy is placed on you actually being of service to the people around you. And service is the highest form of like love, you could say. Just love for humanity, love for other people. Because when you pray, when you ask, your God, yeah, our God, what do you want from this existence? You say it with conviction, you say it with certainty, and you ask and you really push for it. So therefore, if this service is the godly sort of function of the things that happen around us being in service to others is that form of godliness. And our focusing on other people, even people you may not agree with, people like Trump, Kanye, figures that are very big in people's mind. They've formed some sort of service role in society, whether they're serving your goals as other people's goals. They're serving in some ways lower common denominator audiences, not to, let's say, cheapen anybody's existence, or compress and encrypt it into a very simplistic form. But like, yeah, it's like really servicing specific kinds of end goals.
Words, examples. Instead of saying, my friend was very disappointed, say, in that moment, my friend looked at me and said, Philip, what on earth was that? Or instead of saying, my manager was very happy with my work, say, in that moment, my manager looked at me and said, wow, that was really the best presentation you've ever given. Now, do you see the difference? Dialogue is such a simple tool to make any story much more interesting. It is actually the tool that I use the most. But I guess that's just one thing to keep in mind. Similar as with the thoughts, share the dialogue that is a little bit more interesting, a little bit more juicy. If you say something like, in this moment, my manager said, well, I'm very dissatisfied with the inadequate execution of that project. Well, that would sound super boring, right? Instead, pick much more juicy, much more concise and catchy dialogue. All right, now that you know the 5 most important elements in storytelling.
So let's go over the 5 ones. It's location, action, thoughts, emotions, dialogue.
Let's watch a quick 1-minute video to see those elements in action. That story is by Sarah Willingham, who's a British entrepreneur, investor, and CEO of Nightcap. And when you watch the story, see how she zooms into the moment. Can you spot when she shares the location, the actions, the thoughts, the dialogue, and the feelings?
So in my mid-20s, I was running acquisitions for Pizza Express and walked into a meeting room. I was 2 minutes late for the meeting. And the person on the opposite side of the table, the lawyer, looked up and said, oh, thank goodness for that. Mine's white with 1 sugar, please. So I thought, okay, this is a moment. Walked round to the coffee, made him his coffee, put the coffee in front of him and said, would anybody else like a coffee? And nobody said anything, nobody wanted one. I made myself a coffee and then sat back down again opposite him. And as he looked up, I watched the colour drain from his face as he realised this enormous assumption that he'd made. And it was such a beautiful moment in my career, really empowering, when I sat there and realised that actually this moment where I'd had imposter syndrome anyway, running a meeting like this, but I'd been completely misjudged by the people on the opposite side of the table, was actually this incredible superpower. Because guess who walked out with the deal?
What an incredible storyteller, right? Today, you learned the foundations. You learned how to tell insanely good stories. But hey, there are also a few more advanced storytelling techniques out there. In case you want to go deeper on this journey, I would suggest to check out this next video, in which you'll learn how to be...
Oh, this is another great thing that people started doing, is just like making all their content and media seem like a playlist or like part of a larger package. That's something I'm thinking about doing as well. So if you're interested in me reacting to more videos like this, please comment below and for me to share my thoughts. And if you have any input on the video, comment below. If you're interested in how I felt about the new Spider-Man, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man animation pushed out by Disney recently,